Welcome, adventurers! Today we're embarking on a very special journey. This tribute is dedicated to one of the storytellers who has inspired me the most, Dougie Corrado. His ability to transport us to worlds of dark intrigue and chilling mystery is indispensable for story lovers. And so, in his honor, I've crafted a tale that I hope will feel like stepping through one of his iconic doors. But before we dive in, I want to send my warmest congratulations to Dougie and Jess on their incredible journey with Baldwin Studios. This milestone is so well deserved, guys. Plus, this is just the first part of this adventure, so after this, it is not over yet. So hit the like button to pick your gear. You'll need it for the journey ahead. My friend Alice invited me to join her in Egypt. Just like that? Well, we hadn't seen each other in a while, that much was certain, and a vacation was exactly what we both needed. So I booked tickets for my partner Mike and me to the land of the pharaohs and pyramids. Of course it wasn't just like that. Alice always had a reason for plans like this. I dare say Alice and I share the same adventurous spirit. People who see us together always comment on how alike we are. Almost everyone mistakes us for sisters. And we might as well be soul sisters. But while I'm the one who loves soaking in beautiful surroundings to feed my inspiration for my art, Alice is a real-life Lara Croft. She's the first to climb the tallest tree, scale the highest peak, and enter the most sacred temple. If there's a treasure buried somewhere, Alice will find it and bring it home. So, it's probably no surprise that Alice is an archaeologist. She practically lives at dig sites across Egypt. Recently, she and her team discovered a completely new tomb. One of the oldest we've ever seen, she told me. Not that I needed any extra convincing. Egypt has always been a pinnacle of inspiration for me. So of course the tickets were already booked. Alice and Kane insisted on making a detour to the dig site instead of taking us straight to the hotel as planned. They wanted to end the day with a drink at their excavation. So it was late afternoon when the four of us bounced along in a weathered jeep across the desert, feeling like driving through an oven. Alice was completely immune to the weather. Instead, she was bubbling over in excitement to show us her tomb, as she kept calling it, constantly laughing about her own joke. The dig site looked rather unremarkable. A few tents, roped off patches on the ground. Actually, exactly what you'd imagine an archaeological workplace to look like. "Where is it?" I asked, half joking. "Wait for it," said Mike. "It appears on the horizon at sunset like Hamunaptra." Clearly, we'd watched The Mummy one too many times and were now stuck in the ancient Egyptian fantasy Hollywood had sold us. Alice and Kane, who lived the reality of archaeology, were of course unimpressed by such romantic fantasies. To them this was unembellished life. So they led us to what looked like a 2-meter high pile of stone. At first glance it seemed like nothing more, but as we got closer it became clear that this was once a structure, albeit a long, long time ago. Centuries had buried it and the weather had left its mark, so now it was almost invisible against the desert sands. If not for the open entrance, Mike and I might have walked right past it. "Isn't it beautiful?" cried Alice, handing us champagne and beer, which she somehow managed to keep cool out here. Mike and I peered into the rectangular opening, and I could tell by his hesitation that he, too, could only see darkness. Mike is a tattoo artist and I'm a writer, so our sense of aesthetics is a bit different from that of our archaeologist friends. "Have you been inside yet?" I asked, trying to get us back on the same page. "What do you think? This is from inside." Alice laughed, pulling out a pendant from beneath her t-shirt. A jet black scarab, probably obsidian. As I admired the jewelry with a little bit of envy, Mike said, "And you're sure you didn't anger the pharaoh spirit?" Alice and Kane laughed so hard the sound echoed back from the tomb. "Don't be silly," Alice said. "Well, Hollywood has taught us differently, but we're always open to new adventures." Suddenly, Alice grabbed my arm. "Come on, let's go inside." "Are we even allowed to?" I asked, surprised. But Mike was already caught up in the moment and gently nudged me through the crumbling stone entrance. As soon as we crossed the ancient threshold, the air turned suddenly cool. Outside it had felt like a mild summer's day, but inside we were in another world. Kane lit a torch and took up the rear, while Alice led the way. We followed in single file, like ducklings following their mother, champagne and beer in hand. The corridors were low and narrow, just high enough for Alice and me to stand upright. The two men, however, had to hunch and stoop constantly. Well, Kane was probably used to squeezing through oddly shaped passages, but Mike muttered curses the whole way. In the flickering torchlight, we began to make out paintings on the walls, figures in that characteristic Egyptian profile we all know so well. Some were human, some part animal, and others seemed to be made of parts from various creatures. And I don't know if I imagined it, but now and then the figures seemed to shift slightly. Could have been the jet lag or the musty air in here, but I had this feeling that the movements weren't just a trick of Kane's torchlight. Eventually, the passage opened into a chamber, allowing us all to stand up straight. Alice stepped aside so we could spread out, and I gasped so hard I stumbled backward. Mike caught me, chuckling, as he nudged me back into the room. "Don't worry, love, they're not real." he said, and I clung to him a moment longer, examining what had scared me. The walls were lined with niches that ran from floor to ceiling, each about a meter wide. They stretched across the entire expanse of the walls like unfinished windows or sealed-off doorways. And in the niches stood people. Well, statues, but crafted so realistically that the torchlight made them seem alive for a split second. But that wasn't what sent chills down my spine. Where the eyes should have been, the artist had carved deep hollows. And this was clearly intentional and no erosion. Each statue had those gaping craters in its face. Kane came in explaining, "They're demons. The statues are meant to trap them, and by making the statues look like the demons can enter them, like a soul into a body." "Interesting," said Mike. "And no one asked me, but I'll say it anyway. In a movie or a podcast, this would be interesting. But when you're standing in a millennia-old tomb as one of the first people inside, with a dying torch as your only light source, that's material for sleepless nights." Alice strode confidently across the room, unfazed, of course. And as I followed her, I had the strange feeling of being watched, and I remember thinking that this feeling was even more intense because the statues had no eyes. When I turned to Mike, he was kneeling in front of one of the statues, picking something up. The floor was covered in loose sand that had drifted in through cracks and crevices. Something had fallen there ages ago and been buried now under a thin layer of sand. "What's that?" he asked, holding up a short metal rod. One end was scuffed as though something had once been attached there. I walked over to where Mike had found the rod, and sure enough, a few centimeters away were two smaller metal pieces. I held them against the scuffed end, and together they formed a cross. "That's not Egyptian," Kane said, and Mike grinned. "Did someone perform an exorcism here?" Then Alice called over her shoulder, "If you thought this room was odd, brace yourself for what's next." She stepped aside, and since I was right behind her, I saw it first. For a second, I wondered if I even was awake. There, in the wall, was a door. An ordinary door with red paint and a black knob, like one you'd see on any random house. In the present day, it looked so out of place in this ancient Egyptian tomb, especially against the ritualistic paintings and hieroglyphs. The door was perfectly set into the wall before us, as if the architect had intended it to be right there. And yet, it was creepier than the statues with cratered eyes. Alice ran her finger over the door frame, and only then I noticed little markings and glyphs etched into the stone around the door. "What does it say?" I asked. "They're warnings," Alice said, sounding unfazed as if this were totally ordinary. It reads, "This is the gate to the heavens, but not the one it appears to be. He who passes through will emerge changed on the other side." "Have you opened it yet?" I asked, trying to sound less nervous. "Of course not," Alice replied. "We wanted to wait for you guys." "What an honor," Mike said, downing his champagne in one go. Cain came in again, explaining. The ancient Egyptians loved their mysterious puzzles and curses. But usually it's just a lot of fuss over something harmless. And Alice said, "Or maybe someone staged this as a joke. Whatever this is, we'll only find out if we open the door. So, who wants to be the lucky one?" Mike nudged me. "You're always saying you want more adventure." He grinned. And actually that was true, but I didn't necessarily want to become someone else just from opening a door. "You're my man," I replied. "You're supposed to protect me." "Always," he said, taking my hand. But Alice intervened. "All right, guys, we're going together." And there you have it, adventurers, our tribute to Dougie Corrado. You know, I just started my storytelling journey here on YouTube, but I already felt like trying something new. So, what better opportunity could it be to lean a bit into the style of a great creator? If you enjoyed this, let me know in the comments, and be sure to share it with others who love a good story. Next week we are actually going through the red door, exploring what's on the other side. Until then, stay curious and extraordinary.